This is a pair of needles of one of my Scots pine. Now if I compare that to the needles of the black pine, these are considerably longer. Hey, welcome! Jelle, growing bonsai, decandling pines. And in particularly, decandling Japanese black pine. Why do we do it? When do we do it? How do we do it? Quite simply said, why do we decandle Japanese black pine? And in fact, Japanese red pine as well. Here I have a very nice Japanese black pine. And in fact, this Japanese black pine is a special variety. It is a cork bark black pine. You can see that because of the corky bark. Wow, 10 points. This is a cork bark pine. And these are always grown grafted upon a regular black pine. And here you can see there's a little joke on my side. An old branch that I put here because the base is so narrow. That is because the regular black pine doesn't make bark. That's of course not very pretty. So it's much nicer to have them grown from cuttings. I am about to cut off all the new growth of this year. Now why would I do that? The obvious answer of course would be I want to balance out energy. But in this case that is not the case. I am after something else. Something else that's going to happen when I prune these in the middle of summer. Yes, in the middle of summer. Look up my head. I'm a little bit sweaty. It's a little bit warm. We are in the middle of summer. In 3 days we will reach the longest day. So the pine is now in full energy. It has had a couple of months to grow. It has energized. I have been feeding it heavily. I've been watering it heavily. And as a result, I now have nice new extension growth. Unfortunately, black pines are not always that easy to get to backbud. That results in long branches with not a lot of buds on it. So one of the techniques that you can use to get a Japanese black pine to backbud is by removing all the growth of this year. That's what I'm going to do. Now there is, of course, a second reason why I want to do this right now. This is a pair of needles of one of my Scots pine. Now if I compare that to, and I'm sorry, I'm going to hurt you, the needles of the black pine, these are considerably longer. And that is the second reason why I am going to prune this candle off now. If I prune the candle off now with Japanese red pine and Japanese black pine, you will have a very good chance of backbudding this year. That will start to grow this year and it will create new needles this year. Now, because the needles are now already an inch and a half long, I'm going to chop them back. Then all the needles will stay a lot shorter because the needles, they grow, they keep growing for a couple of weeks. Actually, they keep growing for most of the season, and that's why they get so long. If I now remove the candle, it will start to backbud. It will start to sprout again, but then all the needles will need to start growing in the middle of July. That means until the end of the growing season, somewhere around September, there's a lot less time. The needles will stay shorter. Now before you run out with your scissors and you start decandling, there's a couple of things that you need to know about decandling black pines. First of all, never decandle a weak pine. You do it on a tree that has been well fertilized over the year. They've been well watered. And as a result, you have strong candles. If you have a lot of aphids on there, or woolly aphids, or other diseases or pests, do not decandle. The tree needs to be in optimal health because this really is an attack on the tree. You're removing maybe up to 60% of the foliage of this year. So that's one thing to realize. Now the other thing to realize is, how much are you going to take off? In contrast to, for instance, a Scots pine, you're not going to cut into the old wood. You need to cut only in the green part of this year. And how much you take off depends on the vigor of the sprout. Now how do you recognize the vigor of a sprout? Very simply said, this is a very big sprout with big needles and lots of needles. That's a strong sprout. This one has only a few needles, short needles. This is a weak sprout. If you look carefully at the sprout, you see there's an empty part between the old needles and the new needles. That is where you're going to cut. And now how much are you going to leave? Interestingly, it is opposite from what you might think. If you look at these, you see that the weak sprouts have a shorter bare part than the strong sprouts. That's an indication of what you're going to do. The strong sprout, you're going to leave more of this year's growth, actually up to twice the thickness of the trunk, the stem of this year's growth, you're going to leave. The weak sprouts, these, you're going to remove as short to the old growth as possible, leaving only a sliver of the new growth. Very short, medium and long bare section. Well, the very short with only 2, maybe 3 needle pairs, no cut. Then you have the somewhat longer with quite a few needle pairs on there. Sorry, bad drawing skills. There you say I'm going to leave just a fraction. And now we have a very long stalk with lots of needle pairs on them. Growing very, very strongly, right? And there you're going to say, well, I'm going to leave 1 up to 2. 1 to 2 times the width of the trunk is what you're going to leave there. Here, as short as possible. This weak sprout will start backbudding faster than a strong sprout. It is the reverse. I know you leave more and it is slower, but that is the way it works. Of course, if you have a very, very big tree or you just want to spend a lot of time, what you can also do is you first chop off all the weak ones. Then you wait a week. Then you chop off the middle strong sprouts. You wait another week. And then you take off the biggest, the strongest sprouts. That also creates a time lag for the big strong sprouts to start growing, and therefore they will be weaker. I'm not going to do that because I'm a lazy person. I'm just going to cut them off all right now, leaving more of the original stem on the strong ones and less on the weaker ones. Always make sure that if you cut a branch, you cut it perpendicular, that's a difficult word, perpendicularly to the main growth. So the growth is like this, you cut it like this, not like that, not like that, do it like this. So this one is quite a weak one, and I'm going to leave minimal amount of the last year's growth, just like that. Same for this one, nice and weak, only basically remove the growing sprout. So here you can see this is a very long and strong candle, and here I can actually leave a little bit more, 1.5 or so times the thickness of the branch, just like that. I'm in a bit of a dilemma now, because people have told me that they find it nice and relaxing to watch me work. Whereas I am myself concerned that it is in fact a little bit boring to watch somebody just do routine work that I've already explained 10,000 times. So I'm just going to continue working here a little bit, but I'm going to switch off the camera in a second, do the rest of these. If you're wondering why I have a little pot here, I am trying to do cuttings. I am making a separate video on how to root cuttings, but besides that there's not much to it. I'm just going to keep on clipping. This is a very nice one for a cutting. Look at that. Very, very long green stalk. Anyway, I'm going to finish off and then I'll come back to you when I've pruned it. When deciding to prune your Japanese black maple and your corkbark Japanese black maple, keep in mind this is a tree for the hot climates. And if you're not in a hot climate, but like me in a more temperate zone, you can't do this every single year. I haven't done it last year. I've left it alone. I've left it to establish and grow last year. Then I plucked the needles and what I've left is now visible. And this year I wanted to do the pruning of the candles in the hope. We've had a very cold beginning of the spring, but the last 6 weeks have been very, very warm. So I hope that now with the forecast for another 2 or 3 hot weeks, I have given it enough of an advantage to really start growing. This is pretty much done. This is now going to go back into the full sun. I'm not going to protect it in any way. I'm going to water it, going to hold off on fertilizer for the next 4 weeks. At that time, I hope to be able to see some buds occurring. And once I do, that's when I start fertilizing. What you may have noticed, I've left a sprout here alone. And I left a sprout here alone. And here in the top, I've left a sprout alone. That's because I thought these are too weak to prune now. And I hope that this way I'll give them an advantage over the rest of the sprouts. Let's see how this develops. So the first week of August, it's been quite cold and wet over the last couple of weeks. So this pine has been very slow to respond. But slowly in here you can now see new candles starting to push. And most of the places have 1 or 2 candles. Yeah, I'm a little bit disappointed that not all of them have 2 or more candles, but 2 is good enough. 1, but then again, I didn't do this for ramnification, right? I did this to get shorter needles, because what's now going to happen, these needles, the long ones that were last year, because last year I didn't do any candle pruning, I can pull off once the candles have taken over. This is going to be another couple of weeks. I want to wait for the needles to have grown till maybe 2 centimeters, about an inch, almost an inch, and then I'm going to remove all these old needles. What you then get is a candle like this one. This is actually grown in last season, and this has fairly short needles, and they don't grow anymore after late summer, right? So I'm going to have a tree with all these long needles removed. Maybe you can get an idea here if I remove this, and you just get kind of needles just like that. Well, that's all for now. This was Jelle, growing bonsai, middle of summer, looking at a pine, pruning candles, getting buds. And the cuttings, they're still green, they're in the greenhouse. Thank you for watching. This was Jelle, growing bonsai, and keep doing that.